of the sports year around here when many of you can think about nothing else but how many days there are until the start of football training camp. For many of you, that means Saints. For others, it's LSU or Tulane. For some, it even means prep football. The best we can tell you here at Dattitude is it's less than 3 months until all of your favorite teams get out there in the heat and get themselves in the best physical shape possible. Oh, wait. The Saints are training in the comforts of Orange County, California, where the average high in July is 78 degrees. Ugh. More on that later. In the summer, the summer here is a big difference. 78, 95, whatever. Today's about LSU. What should we be looking for when it comes to football? How do the depth charts look? What do the odds makers think? And baseball-wise, has Jay Johnson and that team put themselves in position to actually make themselves a little run, a postseason run, after a disastrous start for the defending champs? We're going to ask LSU sports beat writer Wilson Alexander coming up next on the Dattitude podcast.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? And hello to my friends elsewhere, everywhere, out there who heard me mention the word summer in my open to begin. Ugh. Yep, kids going to be out of school in a few short weeks, couple weeks for some of you. Temperatures are supposed to reach 90 later this week. You know what I think about that? There he goes, talking about the weather again. I know some of you love it, you sickos. Never understood the summer lovers in South Louisiana, but maybe if you're a teacher or a kid. Other than that, no summer. I want it to stay like below 80 all year long. Not going to happen. It won't stay 80 on here on Dattitude either. That is why you love us here. This is Dattitude, episode number 235 for a Monday, May the 6th, 2024. I am your host, Jim Derry. And whether you are watching on one of our NOLA.com social media channels or listening to the podcast, as always, I thank you for being a part of the show and a part of the Dattitude family. As always, if you are watching live, you can be part of the show by typing in your comment. We have some already. I'll show you in just a second. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it, we will show it on the screen. If you are listening after the fact or in any number of places, including wherever you get your podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, you can send in a comment via email at jderry@theadvocate.com. And a reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page. Click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. Before we get to some of our monologue here, Aaron, A-Town, if I were the GM of the Pelicans, would I hire Darvin Ham as an assistant coach? Well, of course. I think he got a raw deal. I mean, that's a no-win job, by the way. Who wants to coach the Lakers? I mean, yeah, you're the coach of the Lakers, but it's probably not going to last long. I don't know what they're going to do, where they're going. That's a whole interesting another show. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Pels this morning. In fact, hardly any. But, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? Darvin Ham's going to be just fine. He'll land on his feet. He'll get an assistant job somewhere. He'll be a head coach again. It wasn't his fault the Lakers did what the Lakers do. He brought him to the West Conference Finals last year, and now because they had is that LeBron doing that? I don't know. Is LeBron staying there? I have no idea. By the way, the NBA playoffs are about to get really interesting. No offense to the Pels, but I think in almost all of these series, the best team won, and now we're talking about some second-round matchups that I find just highly, highly entertaining. And intriguing. Already the Timberwolves and Nuggets have started, and Anthony Edwards is on another level. Man, he is just incredible. So can the T-Wolves pull off that thing? Can they beat the Nuggets? I don't know. We'll find out. My man Jerry's here. Good morning to you. Again, if you want to comment, I'll see it here. We'll put it on the screen. Gabe's going to screen them. Make sure I don't have my Ron Burgundy moments. More on training camp venues later this summer. As I said, many different opinions on whether working out in cooler weather is a good thing or bad thing. In the past on the show, we have presented the data that has showed that most of the best Saints teams have worked out at home in the heat. I get why they want to go to California. It's cooler. And usually when they go off somewhere, they don't stay there very long. They go somewhere else. It lasts a year or two, and they realize they're better when they train at home. It just is that way. It's a fact, at least in the past. We'll go through those things over the summer. I'll show you the facts again. Saints teams have been better when they have worked out in the heat in New Orleans or in Metairie. Just is. It's a fact. Just not going to be talking a whole lot about the Saints today. We have our shows planned for the rest of the week. The next time we're really going to talk about the Saints is on Friday. Not that Gabe's probably in the background going, no, don't say that. People are going to watch. We've got some really good shows for you today and Wednesday. We really do. But, starting Friday, the schedule comes out on Thursday night. We're going to be talking about that all day Friday. The whole show Friday is going to be on the Saints schedule. And I will tell you that I think you have gleaned that I think they're going to be a better team. The problem is they don't have last year's schedule. Again, that's why we're going to spend time on Friday breaking this thing down, because if the Saints have a rough schedule, they're going to play these teams no matter what. But to me, it's when they play them. And I've talked about this before, that they have got to have a fast start. If you're going to have a fast start, to me, you need the easier part in the early half of the schedule, at least the early quarter of the schedule. I think their first 4 games, if you want to throw one tough one in there, fine. But I think the Saints need to get out to like a 3-1 start. They need to gain confidence. They need to feel like they are the best team in the division. I think that they could be. Do I think they're the best team in the NFC South right now? I don't know. I mean, on paper, the Falcons are. But the Falcons, again, we say this all the time. The Falcons going to Falcon. They are who they are. We'll have plenty of time to dissect that over the course of the next 3 months before they get in the nuts and bolts of training camp. Lynn, what do I think about Southern and Grambling? You know what, Lynn? You're right. There's not enough talk about Southern and Grambling. Maybe we'll have a whole show later on Southern and Grambling in the SWAC. I covered some SWAC. I covered some local NAIA teams here, Dillard and Xavier Suno back in the day. It's been a little while. But yeah, we don't do enough on that. So Lynn, I think we'll talk more about that. I have one of my really close friends is a big Southern guy. We always joke because I was in the LSU band, he was in the Southern band, and look, it's 2 different kinds of band. Which one's better? He thinks they were better. I think we were better. I don't know. So we maybe we'll devote a show to the SWAC, or at least a segment, a strong segment talking about the SWAC coming up over the summer, because I think it's important. I think it's a big deal. All right, before we get to Wilson Alexander, who is going to be on this show to talk about LSU football and LSU baseball. That is the main crux of today's show. Look, the LSU, we know what their schedule is. Can they take advantage of 7 home games this year? Big deal. They start off the season in a quote-unquote neutral site against USC. They will play in Las Vegas. I mean, there are going to be lots of Tigers fans traveling to Vegas, but I think there'll probably be more maroon and gold there. We'll see, whatever color they call that. Is it maroon and gold? I don't know. Whatever color they call it. And we'll be talking about the LSU depth chart. I want to go through, especially the offensive side of the football. We're going to be spending time talking about that. And LSU baseball, they back in it. They've now won 3 straight SEC series, including beating number 1 Texas A&M over the weekend. That's a big deal. Before we get to the rest of the show, give me a second to talk about our friends at Evangeline Securities. We've been telling you about them for a couple weeks now, but we're still working on telling you the full story about this great company that can help you if you are thinking about selling your small to mid-sized business. First off, the managing partners, Nick and Ron, they're local guys. They can help you get to the goal line if you're ready to monetize your life's work, and in many cases, your family's multi-decades worth of work. They will maximize the return process for the founder and the family by coming up with a detailed assessment of your business and then sitting down with you to go over those results. What happens after that? Well, we're going to go over that before the extra point later in the show, so stick around. In the meantime, you can check them out, www.evangelinsecurities.com, to learn more about them. Again, more on them coming up. Extra point is an interesting one today. I had a great weekend. I mean, I don't get a lot of chances to brag about my gambling prowesses, but second year in a row, I hit the trifecta. This one I did it on my own. Last year I had some buddies help me. This year, I read our stuff. I read bet.nola.com sports betting director Thomas Casale. I read his little post on Mystic Dan. That helped me put him in the try. It's a good weekend. Yeah. Under the extra point is going to be on Affirmed in the 1978 Triple Crown. I did not bet on that one. My dad wouldn't let me. That's a whole different story. But today is about LSU. We have not done enough on the Tigers. We figured today was a great day to do so. Not only do we want to preview football and talk about the possibilities of the Tigers having a great season, what does Vegas think about their chances? We also going to touch on the baseball season. And in case you missed it, again, as we said, judging by the ratings, you have 3 straight SEC series. We're going to get more. We're going to get to baseball in a little bit. Thank you, Terrence. It was good. It was fun. We're going to get more to that in just a minute, but I do want to bring on Wilson Alexander because we're going to talk football here this morning to get started. That is the wrong slide. That is okay. It's Monday. It's Monday, Wilson. We're both up. We're both excited about the new week, but still, it's still Monday.
It is, but it's like you said, it was a fun weekend, Derby, and all sorts of things going on. Last weekend at Jazz Fest, but anyway, good to see you, Jim.
Yeah, good to see you. I miss the days when I just enjoyed going out to Jazz Fest. I just don't do it as much anymore. Look, I love the Rolling Stones as much as anyone, but I'm so sick of hearing about Mick Jagger. I mean, let's just move on. I mean, I don't have the moves like Jagger, so I don't know.
I unfortunately can't relate. I was like 50 yards from the stage on Thursday.
Oh, are you really?
So it was awesome. Yeah, second time seeing the Stones, and it was everything I would want it to be.
The only time I ever saw the Stones, my guess is you weren't born yet. So, but that was back in the Dome back in the late 80s. So let's talk about LSU football today. And let's start off with that. And we have the schedule here on the side because I think it's interesting. We get to the schedule in a minute. But this team is in an interesting position because even you as a beat writer, it's hard to put your finger on the pulse of what this team is going to be, right? Because there are going to be so many new faces. Now, don't get me wrong. We're going to talk about the depth chart in just a minute. But you got a new quarterback. You got a whole new defense for the most part, which may not be a bad thing. But how tough is it? You got Brian Kelly, and you've got to know him a little bit now. But how hard is it to figure out what this team might be this year?
It's very hard. It's gotten harder and harder in the transfer portal era in particular because you have so many teams moving or so many players moving around to different teams that I think really across the national landscape, it's hard to know year after year who is going to be the best teams. This year it looks like, Georgia is still kind of always up in the top there. Ohio State seemed to have a really strong offseason in the portal and has been recruiting well and brings back some talent, but, they've got some question marks as well. I mean, there's Alabama going through an overhaul. Like there's so many different ones, but for LSU specifically, it is hard to judge completely because you lose your top 3 offensive skill players and you've got a lot of change in terms of, who's going to be, at quarterback. And then of course, even at wide receiver. And, that obviously leads to some question marks about the offense, but there still feels like a little bit of offensive continuity in some regard because, Garrett Nussmeier has been in the program for a few years and because the new play caller has been here, Joe Sloan, for a few years. But then on the defensive side, while there's even, there's a completely new defensive staff, you've got a lot really kind of when you look at the starters, a lot of the same sort of players who were at least in the mix in some capacity last year. And, but yet again, a wholly new staff trying to revive a defense that was, abysmal last season. And so it's hard to really judge, like, how much better are they going to get? So to answer your question, sort of concisely, it's very difficult to judge what this team is going to be because of all of those factors.
Wilson, I think the most important, and I want to start with the offense here as we kind of go through the depth chart a little bit. We don't need to talk about everybody, but you talk about everybody wants to start with Nussmeier. To me, the most important thing about this team and what gives them a realistic chance to be in a position to make the playoffs is their experienced offensive line. Remember, we go back 2 years ago, and I think that's kind of what got them in trouble and why maybe they weren't as good as some people might have hoped they would be. And last year, what made Jaden Daniels partly so great was his offensive line. 4 of those 5 guys are back. You got Will Campbell at left tackle, Garrett Dellinger left guard. You got Miles Frazier at right guard. You got Emory Jones at right tackle. And then you throw in the freshman DJ Chester at center. I just think the offensive line is the strength of this football team and will help Garrett Nussmeier potentially become one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC.
As Jaden left and LSU was looking at how it was going to have to change its offense, try to adapt it to the personnel that it was currently on the roster, especially in the run game, it realized that it was going to need to lean on that offensive line and that it was going to have to build out this run game to be more traditional, not only because of Jaden's legs being gone, but because of the strength of this offensive line. You've got athleticism in Will Campbell and Emory Jones, guys who are able to get out on the edge and pull. I mean, you have pulling tackles that we saw on plays in spring practice, and that's not necessarily a regular thing. I think when you think about pulling offensive linemen, you usually think about more like guards pulling. But no, they got pulling tackles and guys who are kicking out onto the perimeter when they're running bubble screens and stuff like that, just to really lean on this offensive line. So in that regard, in the run game, like it's going to be whether or not that run game succeeds and thrives, which is a huge part of this offense, and whether or not it's going to be successful this season is that's all determined based on kind of on the offensive line. And then, Garrett as well. Jaden last year was able to feel so comfortable in the pocket. He trusted the offensive line in front of him to keep him upright. Obviously, he had fantastic receivers. There's so many positives about that offense. But one of the things that was really helpful for him and beneficial was, the strength of that offensive line. And, it seems like even this year it might be – it's hard to say whether or not it's going to be better, but I do think it's certainly bigger and more physical because Charles Turner, who did a great job of communication and all those things, and sort of all of that part of being the center that's sort of, having to be vocal and all that, he wasn't the biggest guy in the world. He held his own. I really was impressed with what Charles was able to do the last couple of seasons after there being a lot of doubt because of his size. But now you've got DJ Chester coming in, a guy who's like 6'6", well over 300 pounds, and right there in the middle of your offensive line. And now you look across that's a huge group. From left to right, all the way through. And DJ seems capable of doing all the vocal things necessary, the leadership things necessary to slide right in at center. And this is a group that was a finalist for the Joe Moore Award last year and should be in contention for that yet again as possibly the nation's best offensive line this season.
I know you're a young guy, but remember the days when centers were like generally 6 feet, 6'1", like 280, 290, and now they're just monsters like everybody else.
Yeah, you don't have to be. I mean, you can still fit that profile. I mean, Jason Kelsey just retired. He's not a big guy.
Right.
He was like one of the greatest centers of all time. You don't have to be huge, but you look at that for LSU. That's a potential positive when you look now at this offensive line. It's just maybe some added physicality up the middle when you have DJ Chester there with his size.
And the experience on this line, we talked about it, but you got a couple of seniors and a 6th-year senior at that. I just think that, man, experience really matters. And we saw, again, we go back 2 years ago when these same guys were inexperienced and they struggled and they got better. To me, as the season went along, they really improved. And then last year they looked like, this group of pros. So I can only imagine how well, barring injury, but there's depth on the O-line as well. But I just think that experience at that position, other than quarterback, means just so much.
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, when you're looking at it, like 4 of these 5 guys have played now pretty much 2 seasons together.
Right.
They weren't all on the field at the same time consistently, like you said, 2 years ago, but last year they were. And now, so like they know where each other's going to be, what they're thinking, all of those things. That helps in a lot on combo blocks and that kind of thing in particular. You just got that one new guy in DJ, and that experience is going to be vital for this team because you've got question marks in a lot of other places, but you don't have a question mark on the offensive line. Now, to your point about depth, they do need to continue to improve the depth. A lot of it's just, Brad Davis has clearly brought in like highly recruited, talented players, but they've got to be developed. And so if LSU is in a situation where it has to turn to that depth at any point, there is going to be a little bit of uncertainty. Tyree Adams is probably the next guy up at offensive tackle. If you had to throw a guard in there, it's hard to say for sure exactly who would step in at this point. Maybe above Bordelon, but these are guys who just haven't played a whole lot at all on the college level. So there's a lot of young guys on that offensive line, and they do have to turn to that depth, and it could be a problem. But the first 5 are locked in and experienced players.
I'm a big fan of Bo Bordelon. His dad Ben signs my checks at my side gig over at VSN. So yeah, go Ben Bordelon. Terrence saying there's a huge correlation between number of OL starts and success. No doubt about it. There's no doubt about that. All right, I do want to get into Garrett Nussmeier, and we talk about experience mattering. Look, I mean, as far as playing actual minutes, actual game starts. Sure, he's an inexperienced guy, but he has been a part of this program now for a while, working under Jaden Daniels. And look, all he wanted to do was start at LSU. There's a reason why he stayed here. He could have left. And in fact, I think a lot of people thought he was going to leave before last season, but he didn't. He decided to stay. Whatever Brian Kelly told him, he liked. And now he comes in with a chance to be a guy that gets national recognition, and a guy that maybe if he has the kind of season that a lot of people think they can have, you see the numbers, basically even money for LSU to make the 12-team playoff. If he can get that team there, he's going to get himself national recognition and a chance to be a part of the NFL draft.
This is something Garrett, like you said, has been waiting on now for a while. I mean, he's been a part of this program for, this will be his 4th season, and now he's a first-time starter. And in the age of, like you're saying, like a guy who could have left and probably started for a bunch of teams last year, but decided to wait another season just to become the starter, that gives LSU a plus here, because it's turning to a guy who's already been in the program, who understands the offense, who has a connection with Joe Sloan over the last few years that they've built up. And now you've got, 2 guys there who are stepping into these roles for the first time. Joe is the play caller, Garrett is the quarterback, but they have an understanding of each other already, that they don't have to go in and build. I mean, looking back 2 years ago, Jaden ended up having a really, solid season, even though there was things that he needed to continue to work on as his first year as a starter at LSU. But he was also, there was so much talk about, maybe, okay, why isn't things quite working? Why aren't they throwing the ball as well downfield as he needs to be? Well, part of it, he said at the time, was that he was getting into an offense for the first time. But he'd arrived right before the spring, like 2 weeks before practice started. You're not dealing with that at all with Garrett. This is the guy who's been in here for a few years and who knows this offense, and in his first start, played really well. I mean, especially in the last, probably quarter there, leading that 98-yard go-ahead drive, there to beat Wisconsin. That was a huge thing for him in terms of confidence as a starter moving forward, and also just, to kind of, rally everybody around him and just sort of further solidify, like, this is the guy. And now that he's waited for his turn, and now it's here, and he's poised for. We'll see. We'll see exactly what he's posed for. He's got to get better at decision making. Just got to prove that. Cut down on make better decisions in order to cut down on his interceptions and also improve his completion percentage. But if he does those things, then he could be in line for a really productive season. The
son of a former NFL quarterback and a New Orleans Saint, as for that matter, that has to help going his pedigree. He's been thinking football and talking football since before he even came out of the womb. That's all he knows is football. He's a different player than Jaden Daniels. Obviously, he's not going to give you the running part of the game that Jaden gave you, but his arm strength, can he develop the accuracy? Can he be that quarterback? I mean, no one expects him to be Jaden Daniels, but no one expected Jaden Daniels to be Joe Burrow either, and he was pretty darn close. So what do you think we can expect from Garrett Nussmeier?
I think you can expect a guy who is maybe going to turn the ball over here and there because he takes some risks. But as long as he continues to sort of limit the amount that he's doing that, which I think you're going to see a quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over an excessive amount because of just the way he's developed over the last few years. We saw him throw 1 interception in the bowl game. And I feel like that stat line, based on what we know so far, what we've seen, is maybe what you can expect moving forward. I mean, he threw for 395 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. And his completion percentage was around, I think, 68% or so. And so that's just what we've seen. So maybe that's what you can expect going into the year. I expect a guy who, in general, though, has a strong command of the offense, who's, like I said, taking chances downfield, and who just needs to kind of continue to get better at the decision-making, in moments to just eliminate the throws that we saw like really early in his career. That sort of left you scratching your head as to why would you try to take that chance. I don't think we saw it a whole lot the last few times we've seen Garrett play, like in the last 2 postseasons. So I don't expect it to be like a huge problem. But yeah, I expect in terms of statistics, I don't know exactly what his final stat line will be next year, but I expect him to have a season that makes him probably one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC.
For Garrett Nussmeier to be successful, I mean, you can say this about any program, but I think they have to have a successful running game, something that has been lacking, I think, at LSU, because really Jaden Daniels was the main source of running last year, and that's gone. I mean, so this is Josh Williams' chance to shine. He got a chance. He was, I thought much more effective towards the latter half of the season as he got in there more. And now as a 6-year player, he's going to get a big chance. Caleb Johnson, just talk about this running game. Do you think it can be better? They have to take a step forward.
It's going to have to be. And that was the main focus of the spring, was implementing this new look run game, because LSU the last 2 years with Jaden at quarterback leaned a whole lot on inside zone and zone read. Those concepts might be a part of what they do, but it's not going to be the entirety of what they do like it was the last 2 years. You're going to see a lot more counter. You're going to see a lot more tosses, things that get these offensive linemen, like we we're talking about earlier, out on the perimeter blocking, and things that diversify the looks that they're showing defenses in the run game, because it's the traditional run game is going to have to be much more effective than it was for LSU last 2 years. You're going to have to get a lot more out of Josh Williams, a heck of a lot more out of Caleb Jackson as well. That's a guy who looks like he might be poised for a true breakout season with what we saw out of him last year. And Josh is still that steady veteran presence who they really like and who they really trust. But Caleb flashes so much. And you've also got, Caden Durham coming in, and he's super fast. And then we'll see, we always know, running backs can get on the field maybe a little bit earlier as freshmen, that kind of thing, because of what you need out of the position. And we'll see what happens with Trey Holly's status. But they've got some options back there. They're going to have to get a lot more out of that position. And they're doing that schematically. You'll see that's the main difference Brian Kelly told me that you'll see in this offense. In the passing game, it'll be hard to notice, he said, a whole lot of differences. But in the run game, that's where he really and the rest of this LSU team believes you'll see a really new look in terms of what they're doing schematically.
Wilson Alexander here on the Dattitude podcast this Monday morning. The Dattitude podcast is presented by Evangeline Securities. We thank our friends at Evangeline for sponsoring our show and being a part of the Dattitude family as well. Wilson, you guys got a podcast yourselves. How often do you guys post your podcast, and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, every Monday and Thursday over LSU Tigers on NOLA.com on YouTube is probably the best way to find it, or anywhere you get your podcasts. And, The Advocate, NOLA.com, we cover every LSU sport. And so on that podcast, we talk about every LSU sport. And right now, so a lot of baseball content right now. If you're looking at I think you're going to be talking about that team here in a little bit, especially after the series win against Texas A&M. I'm sure we'll be talking about that a lot over on the podcast. And then, so you haven't heard my voice on there a whole lot as much recently, because Koki Riley's our good baseball reporter over there. But come football season, I'll be on there twice a week.
Koki Riley has been a great addition to our Advocate staff here, taking over for Leah Van, who's now in Texas, and he's done a great job, and we thank him for that. Perrin Keys, the host of that show, our sports editor here at the Advocate, so check it out if you haven't already. All right, before we move on to the defense, Wilson, I do want to talk about the wide receiver room. And look, I think Kyron Lacey could be this next guy, right? I mean, I think it used to be DBU. I think it's wide receiver U now. And Xavier Thomas, I think, takes a big step up. You lose 2 guys who were drafted in the first round. I know it sounds crazy to say, but I still think there's some big-time talent for LSU at wide receiver.
Yeah, you lose those 2 guys, but it's not like a major spot of concern on this team. And when you bring in someone in CJ Daniels, who, while he has to prove he can play at this level and fully grasp this offense, which was sort of what he had to be working on during the spring, it's the guy who had over 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns last year. There was only 11 players in the FBS who did that, Malik and Brian Thomas being 2 of them. You got Xavier Thomas, the speedster in the slot, who we saw in the spring game, catch a touchdown. And then you got, like you said, Kyron coming back, a guy who looks – this spring – no single player stood out more than Kyron Lacey did. And you don't want to like overreact to what you see in the spring necessarily, but this is also somebody who we've seen now for a couple of years in terms of sort of this steady kind of build toward what we're going to get this season. And you got Brian Kelly saying, that he's going to be a breakout. He's going to be in store for a breakout season. And, sometimes Kelly can overpromise on those sorts of player predictions. But
As
he
most
also got it
coaches.
yeah, but he also got it right when he was predicting that with Malik Neighbors last year. And while I wouldn't go so far as to say that Kyron Lacy is going to have a Malik Neighbors type season, I think if LSU is going to have an 1,000-yard receiver, Lacy is most likely the one to be it, certainly as things stand right now, because when Garrett needed to make a play in the spring, he was looking Kyron's way. He's got the intangibles. He's improved in a lot of other areas off the field to really fully round out his game. And he looks like he's going to be a stud. And so you got those three, but you've also got some depth this year. Whereas last year, everything was so concentrated toward Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. I think you're going to see probably anywhere in the range of maybe 4 to 6 man rotation. Could they even get to 7? They have certainly enough receivers to do it, but I think you're going to see much more of a rotation this year and have that target share spread out a lot more than it was last season.
And we're not going to spend as much time talking about the defense as we are about the offense, but I got to finish the offense with another veteran, and I think another guy that's going to take a huge step towards making himself an NFL prospect, and that's Mason Taylor. And I think he's primed to have a big season at tight end.
Yeah, I mean, everything looks like he's pointing in that direction for sure. I mean, this is especially with what LSU is going to need out of that position. It's just a little bit different because, without Jaden's legs, the tight end maybe becomes more of an outlet. Like we saw in the bowl game, Mason had 7 catches for 88 yards. Both of those were season highs. And so that seems to maybe be indicative of what they're going to have him be doing this year and in terms of his sort of target share. And they really think highly of him. It's a big year for him as a junior going into his draft eligible year. He's thought of really highly in sort of NFL circles at this stage in terms of what he can end up being as a draft pick. And so, maybe even like a 2nd, 3rd rounder kind of guy right now. And so they're going to be doing a lot with him.
Yeah, he's not Brock Bowers, but I think he could make himself a role to where he is, he could end up being the number 2 target for this team, honestly. I think he has a chance to do that. And if he does that, I think you're right. 2nd or 3rd round is not out of the question. Let's talk about the defense, and obviously a well-maligned defense that has just been, they've kind of had to make over some things. Harold Perkins is back. That's great. Major Burns is back. Sage Ryan is back. But why is this defense, Wilson, going to be better this year than it was last year? I mean, it can't be much worse. We know that. But why should we have faith in this defense?
Other than the fact that it's hard to be much worse than you were last year, if LSU has a good season defensively, it's because of this thing. It's because of Blake Baker's aggressive style on defense and what he's going to do schematically to make them get after the quarterback a little bit more and maybe actually put players in a better position to succeed. Be a little bit less passive on defense, do more, just sort of set the tone on defense and try to dictate more to opposing teams. If LSU is able to improve defensively, those sorts of things will happen. Blake Baker talks a lot about creating havoc rate. They want to have like a negative play on 25% of plays. Yeah, that's what the kinds of things that they're striving for. As he described it, they're going to be a vertical one-gap defense. He wants to kind of unleash those guys on the front. And that's something that you always wanted to see last year that just never happened. They started playing bend don't break so much, and they had deficiencies in multiple spots and all those things. But if they're able to put some of these players who we know have some talent, like a Harold Perkins, like a Deshaun Womack, a Braden Swinson, in better positions to get after the quarterback and affect things on the front, then that's why this defense could be better this year. But that's got to obviously – I'm not saying right now, buy into that. That's going to happen because you don't want to get burned after what you saw last year.
The secondary has got to be better. And to me, that's, we can talk about Perkins all we want, and they tried to move him in spots where he would be as effective as possible. At times you saw him kind of like almost as an edge rusher, just trying to just get in there and wreak havoc and do whatever you could just move him around. And it just wasn't working because the secondary just couldn't do their job. So to me, that's where it starts. Secondary's got to be better.
It does. And you got a lot of the same players back there, really.
Yep.
I mean, the thing that's going to be different in terms of the construction of the secondary is that Major Burns has been moved to the star position. That's something that's kind of like a hybrid defensive back that Blake uses in his defense, and they think it's going to have Major playing a little bit closer to the ball on more regular occasions. And so he's going to be down there. And then at the moment, you've got, Sage Ryan and Jordan Gilbert back at safety. Jordan, through those who don't know, is the Texas A&M transfer.
Right.
And so that's going to be kind of the main difference there in the secondary. We still don't know exactly who's going to be playing corner. They've got a lot of options there, and nobody really fully asserted themselves as the starter. It's going to be a competition that has to play out. But yeah, they definitely have to play a lot better. The other thing that's going to be different, man coverage. Whereas last year LSU was playing these sort of soft zones and bailing in order to try to not get beat over the top. They've been working a lot on playing man coverage. They're not going to do it every single time, every single play, playing press man, but that's something Corey Raymond's been teaching a lot of this spring, something that they want to get back to, especially as you look into this defense in the future in 25, 26, as they maybe continue to recruit a little bit better at that position. They want to get back to being much more of a man coverage team.
As we get into the summer and when we finally do get to camp, most eyes are going to be on Garrett Nussmeier, but I tell you, there are going to be a lot of people watching that defense and see what shakes out there and what surprises. There'll be a surprise starter or two, I'm sure, because I don't think you have anything to lose if you're back there. If you want to take a chance on someone that's not currently a starter, and you know what, this kid's shining, you have nothing to lose, in my opinion. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Let's talk about the schedule a little bit. And you look at it here on the screen, and I didn't even realize this till I started typing this up, that the Tigers only have 4 road games this year. They're all obviously SEC games. Now you got the quote unquote neutral site game in Las Vegas. You're going to have fun, by the way, September 1st, going to that one. The first game for USC in the post Caleb Williams era. So that'll be looked at very closely, but I like the way this schedule shapes up. And, you talk about Garrett Nussmeier really only having to go, you can count USC if you want to count it a road game, but really before they go to Arkansas on October the 19th, he's only going on 2 road trips. And I think that is key for this team trying to find some momentum and figure things out to be able to play in Baton Rouge that much before you really get going.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. I mean, we don't know what we're going to make of South Carolina this year. Post Spencer Rattler. They're going to be any better on the offensive line. They were really, really terrible on the offensive line last year. But that's still, Williams-Brice Stadium. That's, your first introduction to being a starter on the SEC on the road. Like, that stadium can get rocking, especially if it's a night game. They start playing Sandstorm. If South Carolina's in it, that crowd will be in it, and that's could end up being a nice sort of test for LSU there in Week 3. Like you said, obviously the first game being a neutral site, way far away, sort of chalk it up as kind of a road game anyway. But you are still playing in Tiger Stadium quite a bit. That Ole Miss game with an Ole Miss team that looks like it's going to probably have another strong year. That being in Baton Rouge is huge. Yeah. Alabama at home, that's vital that they're at home. Oklahoma at home, same kind of thing. A lot of LSU's got a fascinating and interesting, really an awesome home schedule. With that UCLA, game there, September 21st, really perfect for this being the 100th year of Tiger Stadium. You got a fantastic home schedule, but it does set up well. And I think in what you're talking about in terms of like they're at home a lot to start the year. Maybe that gives you a better chance to work out some kinks. We've seen LSU struggle in openers now since, I guess, 2020. So it's not necessarily an easy task there, USC, even the post Caleb Williams era, because you're going out to Las Vegas and all those things. But if LSU can win that game, then you're probably looking at a team that's undefeated. I would think it would be anyway, going into that Ole Miss game. And then if they can win that one too, then you really start to build momentum in the second half of the year where you're on the road a lot more.
Yeah, it's just crazy that you got back-to-back road games in the 19th and 26th of October at Arkansas and at Texas A&M. Honestly, I don't think either one of those teams is going to be all that great this year. We'll find out, I guess. So you look at the teams that you do have to play on the road, they're certainly not the toughest ones. I mean, to me, all your toughest games are at home, except, if you want to count USC in there and Vegas, fine. But, that just sets up, and you see this. I think it reflects in, I don't know how much you look at the betting numbers. We don't really talk a whole lot about the betting numbers, but I think they're important because Vegas sets these numbers and they know what they're talking about. Again, LSU, despite all the turnover, even money to make the 12-team playoff. And they're only 14-1 to win the national title. Wilson, if they go on a roll, look, I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself, but this schedule is set up to them. If they beat USC, I don't see really a roadblock before Ole Miss. And then if you can get it, they legitimately could be in a beautiful spot before they play Alabama, have open dates before Ole Miss and before Alabama.
Yeah, they definitely could be. Gosh, yeah, of course I don't know. It's hard to say definitively, oh yes, this is what we're gonna do. But yeah, I think the way the schedule sets up too, I think we're of like minds here. Where Arkansas and Texas A&M probably aren't going to be too good. You have to deal with the road factor, but they're not really, I think, this year formidable, scary opponents. Certainly, Texas A&M still has some talent, and if a new coach can kind of come in and be able to utilize that, especially talking about Connor Wegman at quarterback. But it doesn't strike fear in you that you have to play out on the road at Texas A&M this year. And so, yeah, if they can get through that Ole Miss, if they can beat Ole Miss, yeah, maybe you are looking at a team that's undefeated going to the Alabama game. But you're still going to have some tough, and we don't know what to make of Alabama this year post Nick Saban.
Do not.
So it does set up pretty well here for LSU. It's a tough schedule. And, if this team isn't capable of handling it, then I think it could get exposed a little bit earlier than what we're saying. But, because of some of the teams, like we're saying, maybe South Carolina is able to spring an upset or something like that, just because that road atmosphere, if it's not ready to handle those things yet as a team. But if Brian Kelly has their head on their shoulders correctly and they're talented enough and cohesive enough to kind of handle those things, then, yeah, this is a team that could definitely make a run. And it makes sense why I think that they look like a team that should be in the playoff mix there heading into November. And then we'll see if they're, true contenders or not there when you go, Alabama, in the swamp, and then rounding it out with Oklahoma, a team that I think will be pretty competitive as well.
It's so weird because you get so used to the way the schedule is, and to see, not to see Texas A&M down there playing Texas A&M in October. You're finishing. You got Vandy the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and then you're finishing up with Oklahoma, obviously new to the SEC. Just a weird thing. I know it's going to take a while for you to get adjusted to as well, probably.
Yeah, maybe so. I'm just looking forward to this season. I think it's going to be fascinating coverage-wise. There's so many sort of different dynamics going on. We're talking about USC and UCLA. Right. They're going to be in the Big Ten for the first time, and expanded playoff and all these things in college football, sort of all these things that we've been talking about changes for a few years kind of finally being implemented. It's going to make for some, I think, the dynamic sort of storylines throughout the season. It
may not end up being the season that Tigers fans want, but I do think it's going to be a fun season. Prediction before we move on to baseball for just a few minutes, but prediction: they make the playoff or no?
Oh gosh,
I'll put you on the spot. I like to put my guests on the spot. Well, I tell you what, we won't hold this against you because I'll probably have you on again in August and ask you again. But right now, if somebody gave you $20 and said you've got to bet one way or the other whether they're going to make the playoffs, where would you put that $20?
I don't have enough confidence in the defense yet at this point to feel like I could go in that direction. But again, it's May, so don't hold me to it.
I agree with you 100%. And I'm on the fence. So that's actually a tough bet. I think that's a good number. I think all is going to depend. I think they have to go into that Ole Miss game undefeated, in my opinion, to have any chance to play off. Then that gives you the opportunity you can lose one, maybe even two of Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma. But I think you have to beat everybody else. And I think they have a good chance to do that. I just don't know if they will or not. All right. Let's I just want to touch on baseball and get your thoughts. And I know you don't cover baseball, but you know enough to talk here about where
enough
this
to be
team.
Dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Just spend 5 or so minutes on it and where Jay Johnson has brought this team. And look, I left them for dead 3 weeks ago. When they went and got swept in Tennessee, I'm like, okay, this team's done. They didn't show any signs of life whatsoever. And now their RPI is up to 30. They have won, 9 of their last 12 games. They won 3 straight series, SEC series. And they won 2 out of 3 against A&M over the weekend. I thought showed a lot of moxie, especially on Saturday night when they had a chance to kind of blow it. I kind of felt like they were going to, and they held on and won the game. Then yesterday had a lead before just a huge inning for A&M yesterday. But you got to like at least this team's fight, and I think they have at least put themselves back in a position to where they have a chance to make a regional.
That's exactly right. I mean, this is a team that looked, like you said a couple of weeks ago, it's like, oh man, they might not even make the postseason. Like at this point, like the way things were trending, because amount of times you had left, like they had to quickly win some games, and they've been able to do that like lately, like you said, and especially being able to win the series against Texas A&M, at the time the number 1 team in the country. I mean, that's no small thing. And I think it also just re-energizes like the atmosphere around LSU baseball. It's nice, especially here in Baton Rouge, to like have a competitive baseball team around here in May. There's not a whole lot going on otherwise. People get really into baseball right around this time once everything else is kind of off the radar. Like, even though, like, don't get me wrong, LSU baseball fans, like, they're into it like all year. I'm just saying, like, it really heightens around this time. And now you've got some, competitive games here coming up. That Ole Miss series is going to be feisty. That's going to be a lot on the line in that one. Probably still need to make a little bit of a run in the SEC tournament. You're not in a situation where at this point anyway, like, you have to win it to make the postseason kind of thing. But you're not looking at a team that's going to host. a regional or anything like that, but you're looking at a team that is improving its ability to make the postseason again, and that's encouraging.
Assuming they beat Northwestern State on Tuesday night at the box at Bam and Ole Miss, I think if they can go 4-2 over those games, then you're looking at, let's say, what would that be? A record of 36-19 going to the SEC tournament, and win a game or two in the SEC tournament. I think they're in a regional. I mean, I think that's where they are right now.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, that gets you close to kind of that 40 win threshold, or at least I guess if you went in 39-16 and you won a couple games, pushes you over 40 wins. Your conference record wouldn't be fantastic or anything, but kind of middle of the road. And that's usually if you're sitting around 500 in the SEC, you got a good chance to be in the postseason, make the NCAA tournament. So I think, like you said, if they can finish this out strong, continue kind of playing the baseball the way they have here lately, then they'll be in a good position to be playing in the NCAA tournament. If you can get there, then anything can happen. You just got to get into that field, and it looks like they're going in the right direction to get there.
I think if the committee is on the fence, when in doubt with LSU, you put them in, right? I mean, that's just,
and the defending national champions.
Exactly.
That's going to give them a little bit of boost in that regard as well if you're choosing between two teams.
Well, obviously Vegas thinks they're going to get in because those are ridiculous odds, by the way. Anyone who bets that is silly. I mean, unless you just want to have fun with your money. But if you think LSU is 25-1 and you're getting value on that's obscene. They should be more like 50 or 60-1 at best. Because again, they're probably 50-50 right now to make the tournament. I mean, that's where they are. I mean, we're talking about things they need to do. They still need to do them. Go out and do them.
Exactly.
So, I mean, and you see the schedule there on the left. Bama, they maybe match up favorably with. Ole Miss is going to be if Ole Miss can do anything, come to the box and spoil LSU season, they would love nothing more than that. It'll be a fun down the stretch. We just hope they're playing into June, Wilson.
Yes, I think everybody would like them to be playing into June and at least give everybody something else to watch before we really hit the dog days of summer and everyone's just twiddling their thumbs waiting for football season. So for multiple reasons, not just for that, but I think everybody would like for them to be playing deep into June.
Well, you get yourself some time off before too long because as well as I do, you've been doing this long enough to know that once August hits, I say this all the time, you go to sleep in August and you wake up and it's January. So even for a young guy like yourself, that's still the case. You don't get a whole lot of sleep once the football season starts. I know you're looking forward to it. We are too. And I can't wait to have you back on. Well, let's do this again. Let's say July.
Sounds good, Jim. Thanks for having me on. All right.
Thank you, buddy.
Have a good day.
Wilson Alexander, our beat writer for LSU sports, mostly football here at The Advocate, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, all over the place. He is our guy, and he has been a great addition to The Advocate. Glad to have him on. Again, check him out. LSU Insider Podcast, as he said, that comes out every Monday and Thursday. You can find him on most of these same social media channels and find them wherever you find your podcast. All right. Before we get to today's extra point, remember we were talking about Evangeline Securities and how they will go through a detailed process of maximizing the return for you if you are thinking of selling your small to mid-sized business. Many times we're talking about a family-run business that has been around for decades, but as an owner, you've begun to think about retiring or moving on to something else. Well, Evangeline can help you figure out what your company is worth. And if you decide that's what you're looking for, they can then begin a no-cost-to-you extensive auction process among established private equity funds. I stress that this is all a free process, as Evangeline doesn't get paid until you decide to sell and the buyer they help you find is found. In other words, it is in their interest to find the best potential buyer for you, which sounds a whole lot better than, hey, that dude down the street says his uncle's peepaw is looking to buy. You might want to give him a call. Now, Nick and Ron know what they're doing with more than 20 years each in the business. Check them out at www.evangelinesecurities.com. More on their story later in the week. Every time I read that, blast their website, some of you might even know Buddy D. I just can't help. I know I bring him up, but look, we kind of model this show a little bit off the late great Buddy D. I mean, that's where my influence came from. Hap Glaude and Buddy D when I was a kid and into my teen years and really into my 20s, that's what I was listening to. WWL. I mean, that's what I was listening to. I mean, so it is what it is. Every time I say www.anything, I think of Buddy D. How can you not, right? All right, let's have some fun with today's extra point. All right, I don't get to brag. I said this in the open. I don't get to brag very often about hitting a big one. So when I popped the second straight Kentucky Derby trifecta Saturday, even the sun shines on the dogs, well, you know what I mean. Anyway, I knew I had to go back in time and find the best of the run for the Roses on this date in history. It was the 104th running of the Kentucky Derby. It was 46 years ago today, on May the 6th, 1978, at Churchill Downs, 1 year after the great Seattle Slew began his run towards the Triple Crown, and 5 years following the great Secretariat's first leg of possibly the most well-documented and most notable Triple Crown. This time, it was Affirmed, who would have an impressive charge down the stretch to hold off the 6-5 favorite, Aladar.
Down the backstretch, Sensitive Prince now enjoys a 2.5 length advantage. Raymond Earl is second by 3. Affirmed is third by 1.25 lengths. Along the inside, Aesop's Foibles is racing fourth. On the outside, that's Believe It, now fifth. Gap of 2.5 lengths, and Chief of Dixieland is sixth. Darby Creek Road is seventh. Aladar now on the outside gains ground in 8th position as they round the far turn. 3/8 of a mile ago in this Kentucky Derby. It's Sensitive Prince and up on the outside. There goes Affirmed with a rush. Affirmed takes command by a head. Sensitive Prince is second, and Believe It moves quickly to the leaders as the field turns for home. Coming to the quarter pole, Affirmed on the inside, Believe It on the outside, Believe It on the outside, Affirmed toward the rail, and down the stretch they come. Affirmed on the inside, takes command again. Believe It is second, Aladar gains ground third. They're in the final furlong. It's Affirmed with Stevie Calton showing the way by 2.5. Believe It with Ed Mapley is next on the outside. Aladar is third, but it's going to be Affirmed. Affirmed with Steve Calton is going to win this 104th running of the Kentucky Derby. Aladar is second, Believe It third. Gap of 4 lengths followed by Darby Creek Road, Aesop's favorite.
One of the most outstanding phrases in sports. Down the stretch they come. Just love it. Every time I hear it, doesn't matter. Just love hearing it. And one of the greatest rivalries in sports history, Affirmed, that's right, I said it, one of the greatest rivalries in sports history. Affirmed would hold off Aladar by a neck in both the Preakness Stakes and the Belmont in 1978 to become the 11th Triple Crown winner in history. There wouldn't be another for 37 years when American Pharoah did it in May and June of 2005. And Al Affirmed won 22 of the 28 races he ran and finished with a career earnings of $2.4 million, which is what? I don't know, like $5 bazillion today. I tried to bet the Affirmed Aladar exacta, but I wasn't quite 10 years old, and my dad put the nix on that one. Yeah. Oh, well. It's been a nice 2-year run for me here in the world of horse racing. Eat your heart out, Jeff Duncan. That is going to wrap it up for this Monday. I want to thank today's guest, Wilson Alexander. And, of course, we thank Gabe Henderson behind the scenes for making sure we look good. And, damn, we look good. We hope you can join us on Wednesday when we'll have a special, different show. We'll welcome in Pearl River baseball coach Buddy Turnage to talk about his team's David versus Goliath story. Also, how his team is dealing with the tragedy of the death of a senior soccer player over the weekend at Pearl River. If you hadn't heard the story, man, heart's breaking over there at Pearl River. Just hours before he was set to graduate. Tragedy on the Pearl River campus, but the baseball team hopes to uplift the community by playing in the semifinals for the first time in 24 years on Wednesday afternoon. If they can win that one, they'll play in the state championship on Saturday. We will be following the Pearl River Rebels. We'll talk to Buddy Turnage. We actually recorded the interview this morning because he's got so much going on. Wanted to make a whole show out of it. Very interesting story, and we know it is one you want to hear on Wednesday. Also on Friday, as we told you, we will be dissecting the Saints' schedule, which will be released on Thursday night. We may or may not have a guest Friday. More on that later. Also, you can catch me this afternoon, Monday afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. Monday afternoon at 4:35 p.m. on Inside New Orleans on 106.1 The Ticket here in the New Orleans area with our friend Eric Asher. A reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page and click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast, and you can find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. Have a great Monday afternoon. I'm going verklempt, and a great Tuesday. We will see you on Wednesday. Take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.